Welcome, everyone. Today is yet another lightning podcast where we have a guest. This time is Mark Evans, security professional, cloud professional from Amazon Web Services. And we are going to talk about, he is going to talk about how best secure AWS, what are the best practices. This webinar is for pretty much everybody that is interested in the cloud, not just technology. So come in and enjoy your coffee, and I'll hand over to Mark. And Mark, off you go. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vladimir. So welcome, everybody. So today I'd like to talk to you about improving your organization's security posture with AWS. This isn't meant to be sort of holistic how to be secure on AWS or to go through the fundamentals of using AWS in a secure manner, but more it's based upon something that our CISO Steve Schmidt put out in his leadership session at reInvent last year, where he put up this slide, 10 places to your security group should spend time. And this is really things that we learned from experience in the field, both our account teams and solution architects and technical account managers working with customers, and also our support teams working with customers when they had some form of event and we had to help them recover. And so what he put together here was a top 10 list of things where, you know, we believe that these, in most parts, small changes or improvements can have a big value for the end users and the customers. So he introduced it as really wanting people to focus on those elements that he thinks gives them the biggest bang for the buck, and represent areas where people stub their toe. And as security professionals, as cybersecurity professionals, as cloud security professionals, there's nothing on this list really that should surprise. It's things that we see all of the time, but do we ever think about putting them together in one place? And that was really the intent, that we had one place that we could look and we could see these sorts of things together. So you might have noticed that the list that I've got on screen now is a slightly tweaked version of the one that that Steve put up. We changed or refocused a couple of the statements, like number 8 now says take action on findings, not just guard duty findings. Guard duty is just one of the tools in our toolbox that that produces findings, and we should really be dealing with findings as a whole. So I'll walk through this list and talk about each item. So the first item on the list is something that's overlooked and missed on a regular basis. If our teams need to contact you, say we notice some anomalous behavior with an account, then the information that they use to do that is the information that you've put into the console. Not just the email address associated with the account itself, but also this part of the account details that's showing on screen, the alternative contacts. And what we find is that customers will fill this out when they first create an account. They have to put an email address associated with the account. But then, really, does anybody review that and keep an eye on that as you go forward? So, for example, if we try and get in touch with the security contact and that detail is out of date, how do we tell you when we think we've seen some anomalous behavior that may relate to one of your accounts? So the addresses that are used here really need to be things that are monitored. So ideally, aliases or mailboxes that are monitored by a group rather than an individual, and have some form of response plan behind them. But also that organizations, keep an eye on reviewing these on a regular basis and making sure that they keep the contact details up to date so that we can get in touch as and when they need them, as and when we need to. The next item on the list is something that any identity management specialist will tell you. Use MFA. Use multi-factor authentication where possible, particularly in an AWS context for the accounts that you create within our identity access management service and the root account that has full control over your AWS account. Ideally, we recommend that customers really look to use identity federation as much as possible and reduce the amount of user accounts they're managing directly within AWS. However, that best practice advice still stands to use MFA where sensible. It's up to every organization how they drive their identity management practices. But one thing that we do in the identity access management console is nag. Every time you look in that console, if there's not MFA set against the root account, if there's not MFA set against the account whose context you're logged in with, then there's a warning on the screen. There's dead center right in front of you. So we support multiple different MFA methodologies. There's plenty there to choose from, and at least one should suit your usage or your organization. Ideally, we suggest with things like the root account that you use the strongest mechanism possible, like hardware MFA. But there are a wide variety of options there. This next one is in theory, a no-brainer for us as cybersecurity specialists. Hard coding secrets into anything is something that really should have died out as a practice a long time ago, but we continue to see it. We continue to see passwords and access keys and secret keys coded into applications or included in configuration files as part of applications. And of course, if those credentials get breached and you need to reset them, well, they're hard-coded, so you're going to end up having to redeploy the application, taking a degree of downtime as you do that, in addition to any impact caused by the compromise in the first place. And if you think about examples where access keys have been put into open GitHub repositories, those accounts have been compromised within minutes. Resulting in, again, those customers potentially taking a financial hit because somebody's run up some Bitcoin mining in their account, or at the very least, they've lost the utility of that account, well, until they've dealt with the compromise. So we'd recommend in an AWS context where possible, you avoid using those sorts of long-lived credentials in the first place. Use AWS Identity Access Management roles and federation and assumption of roles to effectively generate short-lived temporary credentials for accessing AWS services from applications that you may be running. However, there are always cases where, unfortunately, you still need those long-lived credentials. And in those cases, then, we recommend that you use tools like our AWS Secrets Manager to properly, securely, and cryptographically store those credentials, and to give your applications API access to them in a secure manner, and also to help you manage the life cycle of those credentials as they as you use them and as they go forward. And obviously, there are other tools. There are third-party tools and partner tools that can offer you the ability and the utility to do the same. But as I say, AWS Secrets Manager is the tool that we provide within the platform to enable you to do that. Okay, and number 4 on Steve's list is to limit security groups. If you think about it within AWS, if you know the AWS platform at all, the security groups are effectively forming an equivalent to a stateful inspection firewall wrapped around the resources that you've deployed within your virtual private cloud. So they are absolutely key to managing network access within your AWS account to the resources that you've deployed in your VPCs. And if you've configured them, like the example on screen, which is effectively an any rule, then frankly, you've just opened up those resources to the world. So they really should be treated like you would treat any other firewall rule set, that you manage carefully, that you restrict the open ports, the open IP addresses, and you carefully manage them. Tools like our Firewall Manager allow you to centrally manage that. And in fact, Firewall Manager also allows you to manage things like our web application firewall rules as well. So it helps you manage all of those things within one place. And AWS Config also can help you in that space, can help you monitor the state of those rules as well. So if they get changed, both of those tools are able to generate findings that allow you to identify that and potentially automate their remediation. And then we have tools like Amazon Inspector, and its network reachability rules package allows you to really scan the resources that you've got and look for those overly permissive rule sets for network access. So again, treat it like you would any other firewall rule set and really manage it carefully and keep on top of it. This is a kind of favorite on the list for me. I'm not entirely sure why. I just like the concept of intentional data policies over what I've been used to for years and years and years, where a policy is defined as something like all PII data will be encrypted at rest, full stop. Doesn't really tell you how to encrypt it. If it's stored on solution A or solution B, well, what do? What crypto suites do you use? How do you do it effectively? So the whole point of intentional policies is that you're really giving the builders, the architects, the designers, the information that they need to be able to make the right decisions. So if you can specify the data type, the storage service that's being used, the encryption method that you want to use, the access control mechanisms around it. So for example, in an AWS context, if you're storing PII data in an S3 bucket, it must be encrypted using AWS KMS keys. No public access settings must be set on the S3 bucket, so that all public access attempts are blocked. You should be monitoring any change of policy on that bucket, etc. Gives the builders a good detailed set of instructions and guidance from which to work. But also it really does lend itself to being expressed in code as well. So that really helps you start to build policies in tools like AWS Config that can identify when you're out of policy and help you trigger automation to reconfigure that policy and re-implement it. Centralizing CloudTrail logs. Well, centralizing logging, really. It's great to have your logging turned on. If you don't have your logging turned on, well, how do you know what happened when something did happen? How do you investigate an incident? How do you work back and understand what happened when and why? At the core of our multi-account strategy is the concept of centralizing logs. We recommend that you centralize the logs into an S3 bucket in an AWS account that's designated for that purpose. So say an audit account, that bucket policy is set in a manner that doesn't allow deletion and has aging and archiving built in effectively. The logs are encrypted at rest to give you some cryptographic surety to the data that they contain, and also that where possible, that account doesn't have any direct human access, but the logs are accessed through other means. You could, for example, use that central point to externalize the logs to your SIEM. So the URL at the bottom of the slide gives you information about how you can centralize and analyze your logs. But if you look at our multi-account strategy, and you look at what we recommend there, and if you look at implementing our concept of landing zones, potentially with our control tower service, then you'll see that one of the first things that does is builds that audit account and implements the centralization of logging. So it's key that we keep our logs safe and that we centralize our logs where possible, so that we've got one place to go and analyze those logs. That doesn't negate the fact that you may need to still access logs at a lower level within each account. By centralizing them, we haven't negated the ability to do that either. And the next one's really good practice in any form of identity management regime. Identity governance is key, and something that we should practice well in any environment. And as part of that, we should be looking for and reviewing the permissions that we're giving in terms of roles to our users and the capabilities that they give, but also looking for redundant roles and redundant accounts that we can remove from the environment as well. So on the back of this list, we launched our IAM Access Analyzer last year, and Access Analyzer is a tool that's there to help you identify overly permissive roles within your AWS environment. There are also third-party and open-source tools that can help you in this respect, and also some of the features of Security Hub can be used here to help you as well. As for removing or identifying and removing unused roles, then you can use services like our AWS config service to automate the identification of unused roles and their removal if you wish to do it, if you wish to go as far as automating that. Okay, and now take action on findings. So as I said, in the original list, this was take action on guard duty findings. Guard duties, that sort of primary threat detection tool within our platform that monitors things like your VPC flow logs, your CloudTrail events, your DNS logs, and now it's also capable of monitoring your S3 buckets and the access to the S3 buckets. And so that's why Steve was focused on that at the time. But in reality, there's a whole set of services within AWS that generate findings. There's just an example of them on the screen here. And we have Security Hub as a tool that can aggregate those findings into one place and give your security teams one place to look, to go and dig into those findings and dig down. And you can also use automation to trigger the response to those findings. So you can use CloudWatch events to trigger all sorts of different mechanisms to respond to those findings. It may be as simple as sending a message to a given email queue, generating a ticket in your ticketing system, forwarding the findings to a SIEM, or it could be triggering something like an AWS Lambda function to perform some form of automated remediation on those findings. Right. So number 9 on the list is rotate keys. This really relates back to number 3 of no hard coding secrets, and I suppose this is the next step of lifecycle management of those secrets. So where possible, we recommend that you avoid using long-lived, long-term access keys, but in reality, there's always times when you need those long-lived credentials. So when you do need to use those credentials, we recommend that you rotate them on a regular basis, that ideally you automate that rotation. And you can use tools like Security Hub to help you check for access keys that haven't been rotated for a long period of time. And again, you can use that to trigger automation, be that notifying the account owner to get them to do something about it. And if they don't do something about it within a timescale, then maybe you disable that account. It gives you the options to be able to do that. And lastly, is being involved in the dev cycle. So we've got a quote from Steve that he put across as he went through this particular item, and you can kind of think of it as okay, he's talking about DevSecOps, he's talking about security shifts left, but it doesn't have to be an agile development cycle. It doesn't matter what development cycle you're using. This is more about the cultural aspect of developing a security culture within the organization, making sure that everyone understands that security is their job. It's not just the job of those of us with security in our job titles. It's everybody's job to secure the organization. And so this is really about making it a goal of your security team to be approachable and be visible within the organization, and to engender that culture of security as a business enabler, not the culture of security says no or security is a blocker, which we've all suffered over the years. And no matter how much we want security to be seen as an enabler, there's always an effort that's required to do that. So this item isn't really just be involved in the dev cycle, it's be involved in the organization as a whole and develop that culture of security where we're seen as part of the enabler to business value, not the blocker. So that's the list as a whole. And what some customers want to know is how they can maybe deal with that effectively in a single place. How can they monitor and be better at the way that they secure things? So what we announced back in April was a new security standard for our Security Hub product, AWS Foundational Security Best Practices. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is what it says on the tin. It's very closely aligned to the top 10 that I've just gone through, and it's continuing to be developed and improved. So, for example, in September, we released another 14 controls implementations as part of that standard. So now there's a total of approximately 90 controls implementations embedded under that standard. And Security Hub gives you a single point view of how well you're performing against that standard across your account. And lastly, of course, we've got plenty of training in place that will help you with this, including a whole set of free digital courses. A good one, for example, is a 2-hour AWS Security Fundamentals. That's great for getting someone who's new to AWS's knowledge of AWS security off the ground. And then obviously that can be followed up with all sorts of paid instructor-led training and certifications that are offered. But I'd certainly recommend that people look at the URL that's on screen, and there's a security ramp-up guide on that's maintained and kept up to date that's a really good resource for looking at how to plan training and skilling up your security teams in AWS. So with that, I'd like to hand back to Vladimir, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mark. That was really good. I probably have one question. You mentioned AWS foundational best practices, recently released. In your opinion, what's the difference between the CIS, benchmarks for the AWS? It was also on the slide before. And why I'm asking is that, many times I see, the independent organizations such as CIS and others creating some benchmarks, good practice based on kind of consensus, which consensus kind of implies also compromise sometimes, while we have a vendor which ultimately should understand the product and services and creates their own kind of benchmark. So the users of the cloud services then could be a little bit confused. Why, do I need both? Do I use just one? What's the difference? And so on and so forth. So, it would be good to maybe dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, and perfectly true. And if you noticed on the screen, there's a third one there as well. So yes. That there was also a PCI DSS compliance standard there. It's about choice more than anything. Different customers want to align to different frameworks. As you guessed, there's a great deal of crossover. So, for example, one of the things I mentioned was looking for access keys that hadn't rotated. That control exists in actually all three standards. But if you implement the standards, Security Hub's only going to fire off one finding. But those findings will show on screen. So you get a on the Security Hub dashboard screen. You get a nice sort of dial through from red to green on your compliance against each one of those standards. So they're each being measured, but then you can go through each one and drill down into more depth. But what's expressed is expressed in the context of that standard. So if you wanted to use both or all three, then you could still go and investigate in the context of each one of those standards, which kind of helps, particularly where you're in a regulated industry where you're being audited. Then you can start to drill into that standard based upon, or are looking for maybe areas that you may have concerns when you're audited. So yeah, great deal of crossover. The CIS benchmark is obviously defined by them. Our best practice is defined by us. The PCI DSS one is based upon that regulatory framework. So it's about choice more than anything.
Yeah, thank you. And one more question, again, probably from my side. There are hundreds of AWS services. And it seems to be growing every month. In a new service. And in your presentation, you already mentioned some of the security-related tools and services. It can be a little bit of confusing to someone new into the AWS. You have to let's use GuardDuty or maybe Security Hub or some advisor, trusted advisor, and so on and so forth. And we have all these kind of 10 best practices that you showed. Is there a consolidated view? This is my posture according to those 10. Is that the foundation and benchmark that you mentioned, or is there some other tool that should be highlighted?
So Security Hub with that security standard certainly gives you a single point to look and see how you're complying against that. But as you say, that there's a huge number of tools. Some customers don't want to use Security Hub; they want to use a third-party tool that they prefer. So I suppose there isn't one single simple answer. And again, it's all about choice and giving the customer as much flexibility to do what they want as possible. It comes into things like the secure by design argument as well. Well, surely you should turn everything on to make it as secure as possible to start with. but of course you always have to give the customer the option to turn it all off. So that comes into arguments around, for example, S3 buckets and the fact that leakage from S3 buckets comes up on a fairly regular basis. But in reality, when you create an S3 bucket, it's secure by design, but we have to enable you to turn things off because you might want that bucket to be publicly available because it's just got static content for a website in it.
Yes.
But likewise, you might be storing PII in there, in which case you should be handling it differently. So I guess is there one single place, one single pane of glass? I think Security Hub is getting to that point, but there's still other tools that cover other parts of the life cycle as well. So Trusted Advisor, for example, covers a different use case to Security Hub in itself.
Yeah, perfect. I'm afraid we are out of time. So Mark, thank you very much. This was really exciting lightning talk. Of course, this is recorded, so people can watch on YouTube. And if they wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way?
So either through my my LinkedIn account, which you shared there, or contact me, email me directly, and yeah, I'll help where I can.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and have a good day. And everybody, have a great day as well, and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.